For this video, I'm going to be going over my pitching tips for MLB The Show 24. If y'all enjoy the videos, feel free to subscribe. We got daily uploads on the channel. June 1st is going to be 7 years of daily uploading in a row. So I have a lot of experience under my belt playing MLB The Show. I've made a World Series a ton in the past. I've gone 12-0 on BR. I won 20 games in a row back on MLB 16 where you had to go 20-0. I've won real money in the tournaments that MLB The Show's put on. So I have a lot of experience and a lot of high-level gameplay under my belt when it comes to MLB The Show. In the comment section, feel free to leave any questions you might still have after watching this video, or if you have any tips that you think would be useful for other people, definitely leave those in the comments as well. And the first thing for pitching tips before we actually get into pitching itself is going to be the settings. And specifically, I want to talk about the gameplay settings. I'm here in custom practice on MLB The Show 24, and for gameplay, I'm going to go to the control, and then I'm going to go to defense. That's where you're going to see your pitching settings. And there's different pitching interfaces in MLB The Show. I would say this is going to be what you're most comfortable with, but I would recommend pinpoint pitching. I always feel like I have the most control, the most success when I'm using pinpoint pitching here in MLB The Show 24, here in just MLB The Show in general. The other options are going to be Pulse, Classic, and I would say Meter and Pure Analog are going to be the two that really could compete with Pinpoint. I know plenty of people that use both Pure Analog and Meter pitching, but I'm the biggest fan of Pinpoint pitching for the pitching interface here in MLB The Show. Your pitching ball marker, this is going to be showing you where the pitch is going to go if you're using pitch trail. And if you're using chevron, that's going to show you the amount of break that the pitch has. That's going to have some yellow arrows that show you the amount of pitch break that you're going to have on that selected pitch. I've used chevron. I always prefer pitch trail. You'll notice there's fade options, and basically if you choose your pitch and you notice that it fades away before you choose a location, that's because you have fade on. So I always recommend using one that doesn't have fade. You could always turn the ball marker off if you wanted to. That is an option, but I like having pitch trail. As the description says, it has a line going from the pitcher's release point to the final intended location of that pitch. I like pitch trail the best. I know people that use chevron. I always end up using pitch trail. And those are the pitching settings that I would recommend. The only other setting would be the pitching view. I personally use outfield. I like to switch it up versus my hitting view. I know a lot of people like to use the same or a similar view as hitting, one behind the pitcher. Outfield's going to be behind the pitcher, as we'll see in a second. And the recommendation I would have if you're using one like Strike Zone or Strike Zone 2, Strike Zone 3, Zoom, just one of the views that's behind a catcher. That way you get more reps of seeing the pitches coming in the same way you would be seeing them while you're hitting. But I just like switching it up. I like when I pitch to have my camera angle behind the pitcher, and my favorite one behind the pitcher has always been outfield. So those are going to be the settings that I use, the camera angle that I use, and in custom practice type, we're doing pitching. I'm going to be using Miles Michaelis. He's just got 5 pitches to choose from, so we can really mix it up. And now we're here in custom practice on legend difficulty, and basically practice is my first tip. To get good at pinpoint, you want to understand how it works. I'm just going to explain it right now. Basically, you select a pitch and you can see that little trace you have to do. For a sinker, you have to copy that trace. So I'm going to copy it like that to the best of my ability. And then you want to pull down when those blue circles close. So fastball, I'll show you this one. We're going to trace the pitch. You see that blue circle, the one at the bottom. Once that closes, that's when you're pulling down, is when that blue circle on the bottom has closed. I'm just going to keep throwing a fastball for now. So we trace that to try to get it down. We see the blue circle close, and we pull down towards that blue circle. That's basically how pinpoint pitching works. Every pitch is like that. Every pitch has its own trace, and then you just want to pull down once that circle closes on the bottom, and that's timing up with the release of the pitcher. Some people don't know this with pinpoint pitching. If you want to, you can let go of the stick down towards the middle and pull down from there. I find that that can help you just be even more accurate when you're pulling down. So for a slider, I'm doing the trace. I let it go back down to the middle. And then once I see that circle close, I'm pulling it down. And that is the best way I can describe pinpoint pitching, is you want to copy the trace, and then you want to try to pull down as close to that blue circle closing at the bottom as possible. And each pitch, again, is going to have its own different trace. Pull down to that circle. Try to get the release as close as you can. Now, something I want to point out, new to MLB The Show 24. Let's see if I can grab a left-handed pitcher. We'll do Steven Matz right here. New to MLB The Show 24 is pinpoint is flipped if you do a left-handed pitcher. So the motions are just a little bit different, but really all you need to do, follow that trace. You can see I didn't follow it well at all there. And that's why I'm in practice mode. Haven't played MLB The Show in a few weeks. I'm glad I'm doing this rather than hopping into a game. Got to watch that trace. Try to match the speed. And then pull down. And that's pinpoint pitching for you. Once you get it down, once you get it, I guess I would say mastered. But once you really get the hang of it, I feel like it truly is the best pitching option. I feel like I have the most control over what my pitches are doing. And as y'all can see, I definitely need a little bit of practice. I definitely need to get warmed up. Now, the next tip I have for pitching, this is something you're probably going to hear a lot if you're watching pitching tips video. This is one of the most common tips I hear when it comes to pitching, and that's going to be pitch tunneling. So basically, and I'm never the best at explaining this, but the way I understand it is you're throwing different types of pitches. For example, I'm doing a fastball there, and then you want to throw a pitch that's coming out of a similar arm slot. So I threw a fastball kind of going on the inside. Now I want to throw a curveball that's hopefully kind of coming out of a similar release point, kind of going to a similar area in the zone or breaking out of a similar area and hopefully fooling my opponent. So they just saw the fastball coming in, and I would want them to see then that curveball coming in, but they think it's a fastball because it's kind of coming out of that same area. You're tunneling the pitches so they look similar right out of the hand, but then they're going to be breaking right away, or they're going to be breaking differently. And you want to just really try to play off of that to try to fool the hitter. And that kind of leads me into my next tip when it comes to pitching. You do not want to be predictable. I'm always predictable. I'm always throwing a lot of the same pitches in the same locations. I'll always start hitters with, a high inside sinker. And then after I throw my high inside sinker, I'll do like a low and away cutter. I'm very predictable when it comes to pitching, and that can make the hitter start to realize what I'm throwing. They can start to be looking for specific pitches in specific locations and specific counts. So I would say a big tip when it comes to pitching is do your best to not be predictable. And kind of playing off of that, I would say the next tip, as I just gave up a perfect to Austin Hayes, the next tip I would have is try your best to not let the hitter make solid contact. You want to really try to hit your spots. You do not want to be leaving pitches down the middle. You do not want to be throwing hittable pitches. So really try to keep the hitter fooled, keep the hitter off balance, keep them chasing pitches out of the zone if you can. Try not to be predictable. You just never want the hitter to be making solid contact. You always, as much as possible, want the hitter to be making weak contact. Keep them fooled, keep them guessing. You don't want them to know what's coming, and you don't want them to be hitting the ball hard. The weaker they make contact, the better. And when it comes down to it, the best case scenario is going to be not making contact at all, getting them looking or getting a swing and miss. And my next tip is try to recognize if the opponent you're playing, this is going to be best for online play, but try to recognize if the opponent you're playing has difficulty hitting certain pitches. Maybe you notice they're always jammed on inside sinkers. Now, you don't want to always be throwing it in that same location, because then you might start getting recognized by your opponent. They might start saying, hey, this dude's throwing me only this sinker inside in this one location, so I'm going to just be looking in that spot, and they start making some better contact. So maybe you want to mix it up. Maybe you want to throw some high sinkers or some low inside sinkers, Or if you throw maybe a couple sinkers in a row, maybe you want to switch it up with a fastball inside, maybe try to get him guessing a little bit with that. Sinkers usually are going to come in a little bit slower than the fastball. Or you've thrown a few inside, maybe you haven't thrown it inside, so they're expecting you to. Maybe then you go outside. But it really all comes down to not letting the hitter know what's coming and trying to make it so they're not ready for what's coming. And if you notice that the person you're facing struggles against a certain pitch, try to throw in that pitch more often. Again, you don't want to be predictable, but you do want to play to your opponent's weaknesses. If you notice they're chasing the outside cutter a lot, they're late on the inside sinker, maybe they're chasing a curveball below the zone, they like chasing low and away slurves, you'll start to pick up, especially in ranked seasons, especially in 9-inning long games, if you're really paying attention while you pitch, which is something I struggle with. I pitch on autopilot. I pitch a lot of times with nothing going on in my head, but if you really focus and pay attention, you can start to pick up what your opponent's struggling against, what they're chasing more often than not, what they're late on more often than not, what they're maybe out in front of. You might notice, hey, my opponent's really geared up for the fastball. They're really geared up for the sinker. They're always looking hard stuff. They're way out in front of the off speed. They're timing up my fastballs pretty well. They're making a lot of solid contact. So if you're noticing that, then maybe you want to throw more off speed. Try to keep them off balance a little bit if you know they're kind of selling out for the hard pitches. So I think it's a really good idea to try to just get a gauge on your opponent and try to get a feel for what their strengths and their weaknesses are. Try to see if you can figure out what they're looking for at the plate while they're hitting. Now, every card has different attributes in MLB The Show. When you're playing online, bottom left, we can see Austin Hayes, 84 contact, 50 power. And that's something good to pay attention to. Now, just because he has 50 power, that doesn't mean I want to just throw a hittable fastball like this. I don't want to just give him a meatball or anything like that. But if you notice somebody maybe has higher contact and lower power, it might be a good idea to go directly after that person a little bit more than maybe someone with really high power. Because if they have lower power and maybe they get under a breaking ball, they're a lot less likely to hit it for a home run. Again, you don't want to just be throwing meatballs to somebody with low power, high contact, but it's good to pay attention to the attributes. See, okay, hey, this is not so much of a power hitter, or this is a big power hitter. Just pay attention to the strengths of that hitter and try to play into that. Maybe you notice the shift is on. You have a pull hitter. So you might want to actually get them to pull the pitch if it's a pull hitter. Maybe try to have something slow on the outer part of the plates, have them out in front of it, and hopefully rolling over, pulling it into the shift. So I think a good tip is to really try to pay attention to the attributes of the hitter, maybe the tendencies of the hitter, and try to use that to your advantage. Try to pitch in a way that's going to be best to get that hitter out. My next tip is something that I struggle with personally. I like to pitch to contact, but my next tip is that it's okay to throw balls. Obviously, you don't want to be walking somebody, but you don't need to be throwing it in the strike zone every time. It's good to try to get the hitter to chase, especially earlier on in the game. You want to see if your opponent is able to lay off pitches out of the zone. So it's okay to throw a pitch that's not a hittable pitch. It's okay to throw pitches out of the zone and see if you can get your opponent to chase. Because if you're noticing that your opponent's chasing, then you don't really even need to throw strikes. If my opponent were swinging at every pitch that I'm throwing, if my opponent was swinging at all of these out of the zone, then I would keep throwing it out of the zone until they show me that they can lay off the pitches. Now, Austin Hayes, he's not really swinging right now, so it's 3-0. I don't want to just throw a strike down the middle. I want to try to use the corners. I want to try to use the edges of the zone to my advantage. He chased that one kind of close to the edge, but not right on it. But I want to try to be getting it on the edge of the strike zone. That's going to make it so you have the weakest contact, the lowest chance to hit the ball hard against you. And you might notice I'm kind of throwing it around that same part of the zone, but I'm throwing different pitches, trying to make it so they come in a little bit differently. I've been throwing a lot of outside pitches, so maybe now my opponent might be thinking, oh, he's going outside a lot, might be looking outside. I throw it inside. It didn't seem like he was ready for that pitch. But as much as possible, I would say try to avoid the middle of the strike zone. I know he's swinging and missing at it right there, but down the middle, pitches that are meatballs are just going to kill you way more often than not. And I would really try to recommend to, as much as you can, avoid throwing meatballs, avoid throwing it over the heart of the plate. My next tip is really just practice as much as you can, especially with pinpoint pitching. If there's a pitcher struggling against, like this new slider pinpoint trace, I'm having a tough time so far getting perfect releases. So since I'm in custom practice, I might just keep throwing these sliders until I feel like I'm consistently getting perfect releases. And you might do that for every pitch. If it's your first time using pinpoint pitching, maybe you want to try to get each of them down. Throw sinkers until you feel like you have it down consistently, then move on to the next one. Maybe after that you move on to a 12-6 curveball, but just really try to get the hang of pitching, especially pinpoint. It's going to take the most practice to feel comfortable with it, because once you feel comfortable, it's going to be a lot easier. If you're doing these, if you have the traces down, if you have pinpoint down in custom practice, it's going to be a lot easier when it comes to the game time. When it comes to playing a real person, it's going to be a lot easier if you've practiced it before, if you have that muscle memory when it comes to pinpoint. So I would say a big tip, as cliche as it might sound, just practice, 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 and get as many reps in until you feel comfortable. Really try to watch those traces, get a good rhythm down, and just try to practice until you feel comfortable with whatever pitching style you use. Again, I personally use pinpoint pitching. And then kind of going off that, just some more practice. My favorite way to practice is playing real people, because an actual person is going to be hitting way differently. If you're playing an online game, BR, events, ranked seasons, whatever it may be, a real person is way different at the plate than the CPU will ever be. And the best way to practice pitching, in my opinion, is by actually playing online, by actually playing a real person. And they have events going on all the time in MLB The Show. I think events are a great way to practice. They're free entries. If you lose a game, you're not losing anything. If you win a game, you can be earning rewards. You can get progress in programs, team affinity, you get XP, things like that. So I find that if you want to practice, events are always a great way to practice, because it doesn't cost anything and you get reps in against real people. And I think reps against real players are going to be the most valuable reps when it comes to practicing both pitching but then also hitting. But practicing and getting better in general, I think the best reps are always going to be against real players. So I would say, going off of practice, 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 keep practicing, but maybe move that practice to online games against real opponents instead of custom practice. And I think that's going to be it for my pitching tips. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Maybe if you have any tips that you think would be useful to other people that I didn't cover in this video. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope this video helps at least one person out there. Thank you so much for watching.